Out of all the breakout sessions this afternoon, the session on governance. And before we start, I will introduce the panelists that are here with me to discuss this topic. First, on my right-hand side, we have Mr. David Ukwagu, who is the Director at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Maybe we can give him a round of applause. Please encourage him. Then to my immediate right, we have Dr. Joe Abba, who is the current country director of DAI, and he was the former DG of the Bureau of Public Service Reforms. I will skip the gentleman to my left and go to my far left and introduce Professor Tunji Olaupa, who is a professor at the National Institute of Strategic Studies in Kuru. And last but not the least, I have Mr. Toba Otusoya, who is the DG OTCI. That's the Office of Transformation, Creativity, and Innovation in Lagos State. Okay. I'll introduce myself. I'm the only woman amongst four. Yes. Mother K. No. Thank you, much better. The only lady amongst four men that I really, really respect a lot in the public service space. I'm blessed to have been a part of the people who actually handpicked this particular panel. And I dare say that we're going to have a very, very interesting conversation this afternoon. My name is Jibola Ponle. I'm the Honorable Commissioner for Establishments, Training and Pensions in Lagos State. Thank you very much. Okay, so this session is really going to be an easy conversation, trying to make a link between all that we've been speaking about this morning. For those who were here at the beginning of this particular summit, we spoke about the Lagos Development Plan. This is a 30-year plan. And one word that kept going on and on from different speakers is the fact that this is an audacious plan. We're planning for Lagos State to be the Dubai of West Africa, if not Africa, in the next 30 years. I don't think you guys understand what's in that. Maybe because you haven't read it. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to read that plan, and even as I speak, I'm really, really excited. We are really planning for Lagos State to be a human-centric city, a city of opportunities, where government is setting the infrastructure and the framework for people to thrive, for people to learn, for people to grow, and also for trade to blossom. So this session is really for us to, first of all, understand the link between that plan and the public sector, because I don't think a lot of people really fully understand that the public service is almost inimical and critical to developing that plan. We can talk about infrastructure from today to tomorrow, talk about transport and how we're building rail systems, how education needs to change from today to tomorrow, but somebody has to run that plan. And really, it's the public service. So I'm going to start off with that context in mind and knowing where we're going in the next 30 years. What type of public service do we need to deliver that plan? And I'll start off by asking Dr. Joe Abba, what type of public service do you envision can deliver this plan that has been set this morning?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by commending the Lagos State government for this summit. One of the things that makes Lagos stand out for me is the fact that it has planned consistently since the 70s. We often say in Nigeria, our problem is not planning, it's implementation. But when you don't plan well, there's nothing to implement. And that's Absolutely. Why we have the implementation problem, because we don't plan properly. So this is very important, what Lagos State government is doing, and it's also very important to have a vision that you're working towards. So again, a 30-year vision is great. Of course, it needs to be broken down into various phases to make it realistic. But let me get to the heart of the question you asked. Um, I think the kind of public service that the Lagos State government needs, or that Lagos State needs, is a facilitating and enabling public service. Too often in Nigeria, our public service is almost there to stop. Is almost there to make sure that things are not done. Well, if you're going to deliver this plan, you need a public service that facilitates and enables. You need every public servant going to work with the mindset that they're going to work to grow Lagos State, to make Lagos State more prosperous. And that's a totally different mindset from the Weberian mindset of the bureaucrat who is just there to, pass files and memos and just keep the thing ticking over. So there's a need for a different mindset entirely. The kind of mindset you get when you ask the guy that is sweeping the floor at NASA what his job is, and he says, my job is to help send someone to the moon, not just to sweep the floor. And that to me is the foundational thing that must be done, this shift in mindset. Now that brings in the need for a different set of skills for people to have. So you need facilitation skills, you need the skills of communication. You need to be able to manage contracts, because government is no longer about direct delivery of services. You hardly see government actually, fixing a borehole. They will engage a contractor to do it, and you need the skills from people in the Ministry of Works to actually be able to manage contracts. You need the skills for project management. You need the skills for so many other things. And most importantly, you need IT skills. And the government needs to be able to intervene such that even the underserved parts of the state are able to access services digitally.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Professor Olapa that same question. What do you see? So paint a picture for us about what that public service should look like.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner. I join my voice to congratulate the great Lagos for these incredible strides. Now, when you are looking at 30-year plan, it's a whole lot of future thinking. But like Dr. Abbas said, from the narrative of development planning and implementation and outcome in Nigeria, that is just 20% of the challenge. The real issue is execution. And how does it happen? The plans are conceived at high level, at the level of strategy. And what happens next is cascading it down to the level of the sectors. So they will develop their own strategy, to carry it forward, perhaps using medium-term framework. Then they will begin to, develop some investment sense, what's cost, where are the funding coming from, and all of that. But there's a tricky bit about the civil service, the public service, and all of that. When a new plan comes, there are a lot of plans on the ground. Mm-hmm. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, how does it fit into the entire trajectory of development over the time? Which of the programs are on the ground needs to be sustained, possibly reconfigured to fit the new vision? Then which one perhaps needs to just wind up? And so how do we bring in the new vision into all of this? So what public service do we need? We need a public service with strong capacity, strong policy intelligence. The kind of vision you painted will require a lot of out-of-the-box strategic thinking. You need to be backstopped with some bit of future research capacity. You really, it's a scientific thing. You just make assumption in plan and vision. So obviously the world is now doing more of scenario planning that will enable contingency planning, i.e., okay, we did need to do a bit of trial and error and all. So how much of that capacity resides? Presumably us ministry or sector has their own department of planning, research, and statistics. You then begin to ask yourself, what kind of capacity is there? Again, you might have advisors operating, but the nut and bolt will still have to get to the ministry. The second thing is that we are now in a VUCAized world. I know everybody in the room know what VUCA is.
Do we all know what VUCA is?
You
so,
know?
Prof, please break it down for us.
Okay.
We're in a VUCAized world, so he wants to explain
volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world.
Thank you.
So the service that we know is used more to one-size-fits-all and directed tradition. So there is a need to begin to confront that bureaucratic nature. We are talking of a service the service that we know, that I grew up, I'm a retired federal permanent secretary, and the service is almost like insular, almost like not open to idea. We need a service that is more open to learning, from tradition of industry, from different professions. But the real thing for a very ambitious plan of this house is that the resource is not going to be linear. Indeed, the budget, because of the oil revenue and all, is getting scarcer. We are having fiscal issue. So we need a public service that is conscious of productivity factor. How can we get to do more with less? Of course, the COVID-19 new normal has taught us technology. It has to be tech-enabled. So again, we are there's an emergent fourth industrial revolution. It has its own challenges. So it has to be able to deploy technology to begin to really change the nature of engagement with the public, the nature of service delivery, smarter services, and all of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So what I'm hearing from both speakers is that we need a different public service, a service that is more adaptable to changes going on around us. We need a service with almost different skills. You've talked about IT skills, strategic skills. But is it that we don't have this already? I want to twist things around a little bit and so that my panelists can hear what the audience wants to say about the service. So for those people who are in the audience, how do you perceive the public service right now? Just 3 or 4 people from the audience, then I'll now come back to the panel. Yes, sir. Okay.
The present people don't want to go to the office and be filling form.
Okay.
So we want to develop
Apps. Okay.
that can solve the problem from anywhere in the world.
Thank you. So I'm going to just cut it short. I just want like 2, 3 descriptors so that everybody can, yes, ma'am, in front here. Just 2, 3 descriptors. How do you see the civil service right now?
Right now, it's insular.
Insular.
And it's inaccessible.
Inaccessible. All right. Anybody else?
So devolving it to the local governments is what I want to hear.
Right.
Next.
We have a lot of civil servants in this audience right now. So I want us all to be listening to how people on the outside perceive us. And perception, they say, is reality. So insular and inaccessible. I'll take 2 from this side, and then we'll move on. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir, the microphone.
35 years in service. But while I was there, I told my colleague, I'm not a public servant. I'm a private-minded individual, private-driven individual. For example, when we were there, They call something squares, SWOT. I said, this is for internal, this is for external. You said this is strength, this is weakness. In my own, there's nothing like weakness. I turn all my weakness into strength. In my own is strength. Then I now go to the external. They say it's opportunities and threats. In my own definition, nothing like threats. I thought all the threats
To opportunities.
to
Please give him a round of applause. All right, there's no such thing as threats and weaknesses, just strengths and opportunities. Thank you very much, sir. He said something really interesting. He said he spent 30-something years in the public sector, but he doesn't call himself a public servant, but he says he's a private-minded individual. So what that says to me is that there's obviously a perception that public service does not work like the private sector. There's something that is missing in the public sector right now. One more person, and then we'll go back to the panel.
Yeah, a very good afternoon to the great distinguished panel. My friend Joe Abba on Twitter is Mickey, not Joe Abba. So I think the civil service right now is introvert, too reserved. It should be smart, that's what I want it. It should be smart, accessible, vibrant, and it should be run on technology-driven measures that make the world go around now. And that's what should be the United Future. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, last one. Just key characteristics of how you perceive us in the public sector.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wire I think I would come from two angles. Before, I perceived public service as, I think the first word that would have come to my mind would be old.
Okay.
But now, I'm seeing a lot of young people. So I'm kind of getting more of vibrant vibes from the public service of Lagos State. I don't know about other states.
Thank you very much. That's a compliment. She's been working with us for the past 1 month, so I guess maybe her perception has started to change from what she felt and what people knew about the public sector and then what is actually going on right now. So with that in mind, we have heard we're all sort of public servants. Apart from, you're a public servant, okay. So I'll turn to Mr. Otusoya. He leads the Office of Transformation, Creativity and Innovation in Lagos State. Having heard what people have said about the public service, what is your response? What are we doing in Lagos State?
Thank you. I think first of all, I want to basically agree with the comments coming from Dr. Abba as well as Dr. Olaokpa. A lot has been said with regards to the kind of public service that we would like to see. And there's a lot of emphasis on technology, but there's also one additional point that I feel that is important for us to focus on. That is the issue of the kind of public service that we have now has to be flexible enough, or the type of public service that we require has to be flexible enough to be able to accommodate different types of contracts of employment. So the notion, the current approach is you join the public service and it's job for life, okay? So the world is changing to the extent that the kind of skills that you need in the public service to be able to drive the transformation agenda that you would like requires multitude of skills, and those skills are not the type of skills that you can cage into the public service for 35 years. Particularly the younger generation, they want to come in, they want to add value to one project or the next, and they want to move on to the next project. And if we don't start considering that type of flexibility, we'll lose the opportunity to tap into the skills of these young people. So that is, for me, that is very, very key. Now, some of the comments that have been made by Dr. Olakpa as well as Dr. Abba talks about the issue of, the kind of capacity that the public service requires to move forward. And they talked about the issue about mindset, yes, the type of mindsets that the public service needs to have, which makes me want to talk about one of the initiatives that Lagos State government has put in place to try and change the landscape and the face of the Lagos State. What I'm talking about is the Growth Mindset Initiative. We realize that the type of public service that we have right now cannot deliver this huge 30-year plan that we want for Lagos State. So you need to actually change the mindset of the public servants from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. We ran that program very successfully within the Lagos State public service. And what that has done, it has encouraged public servants to start thinking outside the box, to start coming up with creative ideas on how to solve government challenges. As a matter of fact, we had a successor program to the Growth Mindset Initiative. And what that successor program was able to do was we were able to create creativity and innovation ambassadors across the entire Lagos State Public Service. These individuals were trained to actually encourage civil servants to come up with innovative ideas on how to solve government problems. In the last 12 months, we received over 250 ideas from public servants. And the top 6 candidates were actually showcased at the recent Lagos State Public Service Ideas Day competition. Now, the overall winner of that initiative came up with QR code solution that could actually help us improve the IGR of Lagos State. So what I'm trying to say is that Lagos State government must create an enabling environment where we can empower public servants. There's a lot of talent within the Lagos State Public Service. And if we don't open it up and try to harness that internal resource that we have, then Lagos State government will be missing out on a very good opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
No,
Okay,
you are coming back.
okay, so he mentioned growth mindset, fixed mindsets. You know, mindset is something that is very, very hard to change, to fix. And, you know, the truth of the matter is that we've had so many public service transformation plans in Nigeria, in Lagos State over the years. I know that we have another gentleman in the audience, Mr. Ukwoke, who was part of Project Spark, the DFID-funded project to transform the public service in Lagos State. We've had Project Wheel. Right now, we have Project Talent. You know, what is the problem? What exactly is stopping us from changing the way we ought to change? And I think that's really what we would like. As I said, we can't do it all alone. We want ideas as well from the audience here to try and help us identify what the issues are. What exactly is stopping us from achieving what we want to achieve? So I'm going to throw this back to David to answer that question, because he was also an integral part of that Project Spark.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good answers from colleagues here. Facilitation, the need to change the narrative in terms of the human capital within the civil service. But again, driving that a bit further, like the last colleague said in the panel there, that is no longer civil service for life. And that has to structurally change, that it's no longer civil service for life. Civil service, you need to drive the future of this state development plan for the next 30 years. It's not the same civil service that you have now or in the past 20, 30 years. Because give it another 30 years, we will all not be here, most of us. And the crop of people who will be here will likely be far younger. So in driving that change for this state development plan, you need a new crop of people. A new crop of people. Younger, more entrepreneurial, with multiple faceted skills, who have traversed public sector, private sector, even non-governmental organizations, development organizations, and like he said as well, come into the public sector maybe for just a few years, focus on things they need to do and achieve for the public service, and then move on. So to do that as well, you need to begin to reorientate the current crop of civil servants within the system, knowing that you won't have them for that length of time. So again, I'm happy that there are 4 pillars within the context of the state development plan. And like you said earlier when you started in your intro, effective governance for me is the anchor to hold all the other pillars together and deliver for the state. And therefore, it means that we need to pay close attention to the current crop of civil servants, train them, equip them with the necessary skills as much as possible, mindful of their exit periods as well, while you are also bringing in new sets of younger civil servants who will be more motivated and more focus-driven, who have greater experience with technology, because the new civil servants that you are going to drive this plan with need to be really tech-savvy, seriously tech-savvy, and know how to use it to influence and to drive performance within the organization. And for me, performance too becomes very, very key. How do you motivate as well as monitor and manage the performance of civil servants within the system, such that when people are not pulling their weight, they are easily eased off. Eased off, so that you bring in more fresh and brand ideas and persons who want to work and deliver and be confident and proud of what they have delivered. Because the future civil servants you need want to see the impact of what they've been able to contribute, even for the little period of time that they will be there, and move on to other things.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. You know, he said so many things. That's a really loaded response. He said we need to be able to attract young people into the service who are tech savvy. How do we do that? You know, I want to keep this as real as possible. How can we bring in these young people with the understanding of the fact that, number one, our pay is not the best? How do you attract these people who can sit in their bedrooms and they're making dollars, you know, working from in America or Canada? You know, they don't need to move out of their house. How do we do that realistically to attract, first of all, that young crop of people into the service? And I think I will ask Dr. Abba that question. How can we do that?
Thanks, Honorable Commissioner. Before I answer that question, there's something I feel compelled to address, and that is the notion that you can be a public servant and say, no, I'm actually a private sector mindset. I think if you're a public servant, you're privileged. Not many people get the opportunity to serve their country. Not many people get the opportunity to exercise state power. Absolutely. Not many people get the opportunity to help shape policy that can affect the lives of millions of people. Absolutely. So if you're a public servant, you should be proud of yourself. Absolutely. And you should claim it with your full chest.
Please, every public servant in the audience, you know, you need to give a round of applause to everyone, because I can see many. Thank you very much, sir.
And you know, a servant, any servant at all, wakes up before their boss, doesn't go to bed until their boss goes to bed, serves all day, gets paid very little, never answers back, even when they are right, when they are spoken harshly to. These are the things you have to take as a public servant, and not many people can do it. So let's be very, very proud when we say we're public servants. But back to your question about how we attract the kind of talent we need. Is exactly through what I've said. We need to change the mindset and the perception. Because if the young person feels, look, I could be making millions selling soft drinks. However, here I am, I can actually affect the lives of millions of people. I can actually make the world a better place. That understanding is not in the minds of many young people. They see the public service as just stopping and being a barrier and being corrupt. So we need to change that perception in their minds, first of all. Secondly, we need to pay a reasonable wage. I was really happy to hear that His Excellency, the Governor, approved a pay rise for public servants. I hope that that is structured in a way that makes sense. We need to incentivize better performance. We can't have this uniform mediocrity where everyone is paid the same thing regardless of what you're contributing to the system. So we need to do that. And it's by so doing that you create these niches where young people can come in, they realize they don't have to, in my office, we only come to the office 2 days a week. Now we've moved it to 3 days a week. The rest of the time, people are working at home. And so you're thinking, okay, so why, a young person is thinking, why must I go and mark time from 8 to 4 every day when there might even be no lights, no internet, no nothing. So you need to start to create a system where you can gradually build a new core of people who work differently, are paid differently, have different responsibilities, have different accountabilities. If you're able to do that, I think you'll attract better people.
Thank you so much. I've gotten quite a few things from there. It's to really restructure how we remunerate these new people coming in, ensure we pay them well, and give them the flexibility to be able to do, is it the side hustle on the side? But I don't think that's in line with public sector rules. But
no, not side hustle. Not side hustle. Just working differently.
Working
yeah.
differently.
Yeah. If I want to write, for instance, I can't write when I'm in the office because I have visitors every day. So you end up doing 8 hours of work, and then that's when your work starts, because you have a constant stream of visitors. But if I'm able to take a day, a week, where I can just sit at home in peace and write, then I can actually be a lot more productive. That's what I meant.
All right, so that actually brings me to the next question, and I think the last two speakers have actually alluded to it. We are supposed to develop a competent, motivated, performance-driven civil service. Right now, what we find and what we have is a civil service that, whether you come to work or you don't come to work, everybody gets paid at the end of the month the same amount. Once you have done 4 years, 5 years on one level, automatically they say, I am due for promotion. I'm due for promotion. Not that I have earned promotion based on my performance and I've done very well. We're due for promotion and everybody is moving up the ladder. So how do we shift this? How do we, as you said, monitor, measure performance? Is it even possible? With such a large, we have 101,000 people in Lagos State Public Service right now, as I yesterday when I looked at our numbers. How do we drive performance management to ensure that every single person is not just marking time, but is contributing their quota to achieving the KPIs of the government? So I'll ask Professor Olakwa that question. And also
Thank you very much. You see, we must get a handle on some structural and systemic issues that makes it absolutely difficult, I won't say impossible, to get a new generation of public managers that you have in mind. First, if you attempt to measure the IQ of a typical public service in Nigeria, it's going to be very low. Why? Is public service based, recruitment and HR competency based? How do you bring civil servants into the service? For the last time I checked, in most service commission, is governor recommending, and all of that. So that's one. The second thing is we seemingly have gotten fixated into a crisis where, because of politics, we want to get employ people and all. We prefer to get 1,000 civil servants who are mediocres. When actually you can get 100 that are properly paid and are expert who can do the job. So there must be a shift. And Lagos State, for my last check, is the first going on the track of professionalizing the HR fund. Now the next thing we need to look at, immediately you begin to tinker with that, then you ask yourself, in what context does a civil servant operate? It's still more like public service rule, one size fits all standards. It's still more like rule compliance. It's still more like analog. Then you still use APA for purposes of assessing who is performing or not. So these are, so then what is the work culture? My PhD thesis was this. In virtually all public service in Nigeria, there are too many people doing nothing. They are doing nothing not because they are, but because really the service can do without them. A public service in Nigeria technically relies more on consultancy services to do the core job. Again, we must never be carried away. Every public service, whether in Nigeria or everywhere in the world, does not rely on the civil service alone. We have the core service, which is responsible for policy and continuity. We have a lot of agencies that smart governors can put into good, task forces manned by high-end people, and more often than not, they use data. There are a lot of private-public partnerships. There are a lot of contracting, outsourcing, and all of that. So there are methodology, coping mechanism where the civil service is unable to rise to the challenge of. So, and when you are looking at the service, using the typical management template, you don't just look at men. You have to ask yourself method, within which system are they operating? What about money? How is budgeting done? Now, is it performance budgeting or is it incremental budgeting where you simply spend and all of that? You need to look at all of that. How is your inventory managed, material? What's the maintenance culture? How do you manage projects? What level of supervision? What standardization do you use to get, who gets the contracts? What kind of procurement procedure is used? You also need to say the working tools. Does the civil servant even have the working tool to really work? How much of the machine technology have been put in place? So immediately we get all of a handle on all of that, we will then begin to, know where to put our fingers in order to be able to change. But absolutely, it is not difficult at all to push this public service. The tricky end that we need to manage well is the industrial relation bit. I recall when I was consulting for Fashola, he had gotten PwC, I can't remember Gulewe at that time. He really wanted to bring the high-end people who can be properly paid. There was a job evaluation being done. But nobody could face the unions. Because really, you need to create the space in order to bring the high-end people who will do the job. So it's a lot of change management there. And
thank you so much, sir. Okay, he said again, quite a very, very, very loaded response. But I'm going to just, before I take questions from the audience, what are we doing with performance management? I mean, there's a lot going on in Lagos State right now. I know that, for instance, for permanent secretaries now, it's not business as usual. It's not who you know. I have a few of the new PSs here. You guys went through hell and high water to earn your position as permanent secretary. I have, there's a lady over there, Madam Suki, she's there, and she can testify to the fact that there was a full-day assessment center. Before that, you had a CBT. The people that made it through the CBT had a full-day assessment center. You did presentations, you did group work, you did, there was case studies, and this assessment was done by both public and private sector individuals. So you can't say, oh, I know this person influenced my results. And there's not one, there are no two exercises that are managed by just one person. So it was a free and fair assessment, and I think we're on the third cycle now where we have a crop of permanent secretaries that have gone through assessment, and we're picking the best of the best for that top role in the Lagos State Public Service. And we're soon going to move down to director level. So, well, the change is happening where people realize that it's merit before you get to the top, and we're going to push that down. So I'm just going to ask OTCI, DG OTCI, Mr. Otusonya, to tell us a little bit more about other, Project Talent is one project that we're doing right now, where we're dealing with quite a few of these things. Leadership is key for us in Lagos State. How do we dilute the leadership style we have right now? How do we attract the right people? How do we engage people in the service? How do we motivate them? And also nurture them. There's a lot going on in capacity development. We have an LMS now in Lagos State where we have 30,000 people that have signed on to the learning management system. They can, from your phone, from your tablet, you can access these courses, 14,000 courses plus, where you can learn different tracks. So there's quite a lot going on in the service. But I want you to answer that question. Give us a high-level overview, then I'll ask people to ask questions.
Thank you. Honorable Commissioner, I can see that you are very excited because you've actually gone ahead to actually speak about a lot of the initiatives that OTCI is handling in conjunction with the core establishment agencies, of course, to try and bring discipline into the public service and manage our people much, much better. Just like you mentioned, we have a reform program that we are currently running, which is Project Talent. Now, Project Talent is really trying to transform the HR value chain within the Lagos State Public Service. And it has a lot of work streams. We are currently in phase 1 of that particular project. And I'll quickly just touch on some of the work streams and what those work streams are intending to do. First of all, which relates to your question, I want to talk about workforce planning. What we're looking to do in Lagos State is, just like Dr. Olaipa mentioned, when you go to most public service in any of the states of the Federation, it's usually overbloated. You have too many people running around, not necessarily doing anything. You go to some ministries, they have under capacity, and then you go to others, they have overcapacity. So how do you try to balance all of that to make sure that you have the right people in the right place, doing the right things at all times? So workforce planning, which is more or less what we refer to as workforce optimization, that is really looking to address that so that we have a scientific way of actually measuring the manpower that is required across all cadres. So that's one aspect of Project Talent. Another aspect which is also critical and very important is the performance management. Now, under performance management, what we're looking to do is that in most public services, they rely on schemes of service. In Lagos State, we're moving completely away from schemes of service. We want to ensure that all the job roles within Lagos State have job descriptions. When they have job descriptions, it's a lot easier to actually set targets, and it's a lot easier to also monitor whether those targets are being achieved. We're also trying to borrow some of the practices in the private sector. We are exploring things like performance-related pay, so that not everybody is on the same pay level. So if we're able to identify that some individuals are performing exceptionally well, there should be some element of reward for those individuals. We're also looking at a high flyer scheme, which is also popular within the private sector as a way of fast-tracking those individuals that are doing exceptionally well. Other areas within Project Talent that is also important is we're looking at the culture. We've talked about how the public service is currently perceived, and a lot of comments have come up in terms of old, inaccessible, and all of those things. So we're asking the critical question, what kind of culture do we need in the public service? I mean, what is the current culture? And people have alluded to their own perception. So what type of culture would you need in the public service, and how do we imbibe that culture where, I think Dr. Abba mentioned the public service that is more or less a facilitator where, there's a clear element of collaboration across all ministries where we are no longer working in silos. So those are the kind of issues that we are thinking about in terms of having a change in direction in terms of how the Lagos State Public Service is managed. And I must not forget to mention the learning management system. For me, one of the reasons why that is really, really important is that prior to the launch of that platform, some of the issues that come up from civil servants or criticism levied at your ministry is that it's the same set of people that we send on training all the time, that a lot of people actually miss out on capacity building. Now, the LMS now is a very level playing field. As a public servant, as long as you're a public servant within Lagos State, you have access to that platform. You can take multiple courses, and that can help accelerate your own capacity development in the state. Absolutely. So I'm going to stop there.
Thank you very much. I'll add to that we're also doing an industry exchange program that's going to start very soon, where we're taking people from the private sector into industry for a period of 3 months, again, to learn hands-on new technologies. They're going to learn the culture in the private sector and hopefully bring that back to the public sector. So there's a lot going on in that space. So I'm going to leave. Thank you. So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so answering questions. So they're on the hot seat now. If anybody has any questions, please raise your hand and we'll identify you. Yes, sir, you have had your hand up for quite a while now. Please, could we have the microphone in front? Right here. Microphone here, please. Taking a long way around. Is it on? No, it's not.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
The microphone's not working, I can speak.
Thank you.
I just want to bring a little bit of challenge to the panel. I don't disagree with anything that the panel has said about what's needed for a future modern public service. But what the panel hasn't addressed is what's the purpose of the public service, and this seems to me to be really critically important. The private sector has got a responsibility to derive as much profit in as short a time as possible.
Will you take that?
And this can be really dangerous. Politicians have got a slightly different time scale, usually about 4 or 5 years, but they're focused on winning elections, building constituencies, accumulating power. These two combined have had, if you don't mind my saying so, disastrous implications for the planet as a whole. And the risk is that if you bring these together around this focus just on growth and on wealth, the planet has probably got only another 50 years left to go. So by the time you achieve your plan, Lagos will be underwater and there will be no forests, the climate will have been destroyed. The public service has got a responsibility to be the custodians of the future. And that's what you need your public service to be doing. It needs to be putting in place the mechanisms to control the profit motive, to make sure that it's used for good, to control politicians, to make sure that they take a longer-term perspective rather than a shorter-term perspective. That's the skill set that public service today needs to have. Otherwise, there is just simply going to be nothing left for us to be public managing.
Thank you so much for that existential comment, and I think he's absolutely right. And I love what you said, that we are the custodian of the future. And for every public servant here, I think that should leave you in fear and, trembling, because that's very, very powerful. Thank you very much. At the back, and then I'll come to the front.
Thank you very much. My question is directed to Professor Laupa. I've known you for a while. I knew you were involved in an Ibadan project some years ago. I met at Transcorp during the Nigerian Economic Summit. I think it was last year or so. Now, I anchor a presidential project on national development. And we do feasibility studies and we project the achievements of some government agencies under the Buhari administration. And I've noticed something. Some governmental agencies do virtually the same thing. Apart from one or two differences, they have the overlapping responsibility. For example, I know with the project with NOTAP, NITDAS, MEDAN, BOI, they're doing virtually the same thing, apart from one or two slight differences. So what are some of your recommendations as to solving this? Because I know there was an Orasoni report, and there was a recommendation as to scrapping or merging some agencies, but I know that for political reasons, they've not been instrumental as to effecting that. That's number one. Then number two, I stay in Abuja, and I can tell you for free that the civil service is overbloated. In fact, I go to most of the federal government agencies, ministries, and they just sit down there doing nothing. In fact, a lot of them find it very difficult to pay. When we do projects for them, in fact, they've actually sent me out of the office. They will say, okay, go. We've never collected salary. I go see signs of frustration and there's anguish, and they're very bitter and the rest of that. So that's one of your recommendations. What efforts are you making as to making recommendations solving the problem? Because I know you've been the voice as to championing reforms in the civil service. That's my question, sir.
Thank
then
you.
concerning the ASU strike, sir, because it's part of governance. Another name for ASU is strike.
Okay.
What are some of your recommendations as to solving this problem? Because we can't continue like this. A lot of students are frustrated, they're angry.
Okay.
A couple of them have told me they're not even going back to school again.
Okay, so I have to state here that every single Lagos State tertiary institution is not on strike. We are working, and we have been able to address the issues that the federal counterparts are having. We have addressed it, we have solved it, and that's why Lagos State tertiary institutions are in session as we speak. And I think that deserves another round of applause, because our ministry was integral to doing that. And also to just bear in mind that we're talking about Lagos State, and I think your issues are more issues that are related to federal. Lagos State, we pay as at when due every single month without fail. So I don't think the staff have 23rd. Everybody gets their alert. You know, so we don't have issues with payments and frustration, apart from the fact that the pay is relatively low, as Dr. Abba said. But again, Mr. Governor has approved for an increase, and we're working on that. So I'm not sure if we should, because of time, if you don't mind, because they're related to federal, maybe we can take this offline, and I'll just ask somebody else to ask a question. The Commissioner for Finance, and then I'll come to Mr. Ifeanyi. I have to say also that the Commissioner for Finance, I know he doesn't like saying this, but he's one of the youngest cabinet members, and he's one of the leaders that when he speaks in cabinet, everybody listens. You know, excellent at his job, and very well respected, just to show the type of leaders that Mr. Governor has on his cabinet to lead Lagos State.
Thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner. So mine is not a question. Thank you for those kind words. It's just a remark. I just want to do a rejoinder to what Dr. Abba said about being a public servant. The question you posed, initially was, how do we attract talent, and we talked about issues of pay. So I think one of the ways to actually attract people into the public service is to go from the point of view of preaching the fact that it is service. I'm using myself as an example. I've worked all my life in the private sector. Pretty good career, very fulfilling career. I got to a point, and I said, this fulfillment is not enough. I was looking for that opportunity to come into an environment where whatever I do can even affect hundreds, millions, affect policies. As Commissioner for Finance, so my job is not just, accounting or finance, agriculture, infrastructure, security, because whatever we do at the State Executive Council affects every aspect of life. So I think what we can do, and it's been the greatest honor of my life in the last 3.5 years as a public servant.
Yeah.
So there's this tremendous, feeling of success and fulfillment that comes with. And that's why I used to tell people that work for me, for us in the ministry, that you don't know how lucky you are that you are the driver's seat, helping to shape the lives and the destinies of hundreds and millions of people. So to all the public servants, I think we should feel privileged because we are just a few out of millions of people. And from my experience, what I've found out is that out of the brightest minds, committed people I've ever met in my life is in the public service.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
True.
10% of people in the public service will do what they need to do no matter what, whether you pay them well or you don't pay them. There is another 10% that will not do anything regardless of what you do. I think our job as leaders is to manage those 80% that would either go right or left if you allow them. So we can use the pay system, the flexi work hours, and all the things that you've talked about to manage those 80%. And once we manage those 80%, I can tell you that we are home for good. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And just to add to that, I think just to say that, it's so easy for us to complain as Nigerians. We're the biggest complainers. 80% of us don't even pay tax. So how are we expecting service? I tell people when they complain about Lagos State, first question is, do you pay your taxes? If you don't, then you don't have a right to complain because every single person has civic responsibility to pay their taxes because it's from those taxes that the services can be rendered. Secondly, is for us to recognize, and again, just like he said, I have worked in the private sector all my life, and it was really that opportunity to serve. Doesn't matter, it's to serve the nation and to say that there's no japa here. We can solve this problem. We can do it in this country because we have the talent, the mind, the skill set to do it and to get Nigeria to where it needs to be. So please, let's stop complaining. Join hands with the public service to get the job done. Thank you. Okay, so we'll have one question here. I'm very mindful of time, that we have 2 more minutes. We have a hand up in front.
Thank you so much. I have 2 concerns. Okay. One is, you're talking about performance and linked to KPIs. How does that work? In terms of eliminating those who do not meet up to their indicators, is it something that is strictly managed? Because if people know that they're going to get sacked if they do not meet the key indicators that they have signed up to, you have to immunize 100 children by 30th of whatever, first quarter. If it's not done, you're gone. Yeah. So I want to see how that works. Okay. And the second thing is, I'm also very concerned about local government, the connection between the state and the local. Because in most places, it's your local government that you go to get your services, to get your questions answered, and all of that. I mean, I come from the private sector, so I know that it's at that level, it's that point of contact, that delivery must be most efficient. Yeah. This plan, it's going to be mostly executed by the hundreds of people at the local government level, at the entrepreneurial. How are we devolving the access to information? In the last session, we were talking about the ACFA initiative and how citizens can get the information. Okay. That should be in every local government. Okay. Are we thinking of getting this
Thank you.
into
So
our
that's
plan?
the question to maybe Dr. Laupa. And then just one last question, and then I'll just ask people to round up. Can we have...
Okay, mine is actually very straightforward. It's about how we deal with the herd mentality in transition management. Some of the good initiatives we worked on, and I'm happy he's sustained it because he's been there for over 10 years now. What about if he makes a transition and you guys make a transition? We've seen a relapse for more than 4 years. And most of the initiatives actually died out because there's a herd mentality. The herd mentality is that once the chief executive makes a proclamation and there's a departure, no one within the public service, hardworking colleagues here, and I worked with most of them for over 10 years, has the audacity or the nerve to challenge that. How do we manage that? I have a lot of thoughts, but I know my boss here would say much about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just have Professor Lapa and Dr. Joaba answer those two questions. And then, I'm sorry, my time is up.
Okay, thank you very much for that. The truth is that the public service need deep-seated unbundling. We have carried forward a lot of structures and systems. Really, the kind of structure that we need, we don't have. Those that are existing are outdated. But because of industrial relation issue, we are, so Oronsaye, for example, has been there. It has not been implemented. So there are a lot of duplicated and redundant structure. But it's a lot more fundamental. We need to get back to what is the role of the state relative to market. Should the ministry be running schools? Should they be running hospitals? The services are big, getting high-end, buy services, use professionalism to deliver, So you need to begin, it's a whole lot. When you rethink the role of the state and you redefine the relative role of civil society and all, then what you do is you then need to look at each ministry and determine what are core functions, what are the non-core functions, and do a lot of restructuring and use other alternative mode to deliver services. The second issue is about this ARPA stuff, I think. Is there anything on performance management?
Local government.
The local government, okay. Now, the local government stuff is that I think the local government are stuck in the old federalism dysfunctionality. They are really not existing as such, except insofar as the state wants them to. But they need to have a bit of a life. The real issue is that over the years, because the community are not governed, people have developed a lot of coping mechanisms. They started doing their waste disposal themselves. They are providing security. They are doing a susu to now. So the traditional rulers are more in charge of community than even the local government itself. Do the local government have even development plan that guides? Are they given targets? Are they monitored? Are they made accountable? Are they given resources to really manage? Is the local government capable of attracting the high-end brains? There are so many PhD holders who prefer to operate at that level and serve their people. But really, you need a measure of autonomy. You need a lot of power and authority to be able to function. So we need to really rethink the entire local government system. There needs to be a connection between the state structure and the non-state structure, the community-based structures that have been delivering service to the people all the while. How can there be economies of scale and synergy to drive development?
Thank you very much. So your local government is responsible for many things that you hold state government responsible for. So the roads in front of your house is not state, it's local government. The primary schools in your locality is local government that should run it, even the PHCs. But a lot of people don't know that, so they blame Lagos State for everything. So again, I hear you. We need to see how we can bring them on board and see how they also achieve their own targets. Thank you. So last question, and then we'll wrap up. Sorry, last answer, and then we wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to address a few things very quickly. One is, we must always be careful when we make sweeping statements like the public service is over-bloated, without saying over-bloated for what. And it goes to Chris's point about what is the role of the public service. So if you say over-bloated, maybe for the current services it's providing, maybe. For what it should do and what it should provide, probably we're understaffed.
Maybe.
The entire Nigerian public service at all levels, federal, state, and local, is about 5 million people.
Wow.
The UK, with a population of 60 million, has a public service of 5.7 million people. And that's serving 60 million people. We have 5 million serving 215 million people. However, the UK produces 6 times Nigeria's GDP. So we must always be careful when we make those sweeping statements. The second thing is, look, you should not go to any public service establishment and find people idling around doing nothing. I have a book out, it's called Nigerians in Theory. One of the things it says is that after a speech, no matter how loudly you clap, the MC will always ask for another round of applause. But the other thing it says is that any public service organization you go to and see people loitering around, the head of that organization is chopping money. I can bet you, I've been a DG in charge of reforms, I know where all the bodies are buried. Anybody that has staff loitering around, go and check very well. That person is chopping money. Because if they are not, the challenges of the state are such that there's no way you cannot create work for people to do, to solve some of those problems. So that's one thing I wanted to say very quickly. Second thing was with regards to what Chris said, and I think he should have been, he should have declared his bias by admitting that he's a civil servant, first of all, so you can see where it's coming from. But you know,
yes,
but we've actually been quite good at being that custodian and saying no. That was eroded in the 90s when we took away the role of the permanent secretary as accounting officer. That sort of destroyed the independence of the civil service. And even though we later changed that, the mindset never changed. The politician comes in believing that they are the Lord and Master. And you know, I go to induction retreats for new commissioners, new ministers, and you tell them, Honorable Minister, do you know you cannot sack anybody? Do you know you can't employ anybody? Do you know you can't award any contract? Do you know? They look at me and say, who is this guy? He doesn't know what he's talking about. You think I campaigned and all that to become minister for you to now tell me I cannot? But actually they cannot. Yeah. So they come with these mindsets, which you know is very difficult to actually change. So that challenge hasn't been solved. But the important thing that Chris said is that in addition to, you know, we want a facilitative and enabling public servant with a growth mindset, we also need to retool the public servant and the civil servant to what he was before, where he will give you his unbiased opinion. You like it or not, he's going to set it in writing. And 20 years down the line, this is what he said. If you now choose to do something different, that's entirely up to you. But the civil servant would have stated his position, he would have given you the options, properly researched, and you would have chosen the one you want to take. So we need to retool the public service to do that. But that cannot be our only role. Like I said, we're very good at doing that. We're very good at saying no. What we're not good at is how do we grow this economy? How do we grow this state? How do we work in a different way? How do we bring more wealth? Because to be honest with you, the reason why everybody likes what the Honorable Commissioner of Finance says is because he controls the money. Okay, one of the reasons. So without wealth and prosperity, it's very, very difficult to motivate anybody to do exceptional work or to even attract them into the system. Finally, what Ifeanyi said about managing transitions, again, it goes back to what is the state trying to achieve? You know, what is the state trying to achieve? Because if that is clear, and it's the reason why summits like this are very important. It's the reason why a 30-year development plan is very important. It's the reason why if you do the plan well and every stakeholder buys into it, it doesn't matter who comes, they will follow through. If they don't follow through, they won't get a second term, and I think we have an example of that in Lagos. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The round of applause for, okay, last parting words, and then we will definitely round up.
Sincere apologies, but just to say a huge thank you to you and to others for putting this in place. Just some few things again to draw from what colleagues have said and what we have discussed today. You, as the Honorable Commissioner and the Head of Service, who unfortunately is not here, have a huge task ahead of you to fulfill this development plan. For me, that is to cascade the understanding and the dream of this plan to every civil servant across your different sectors. If it is possible, I'm aware that part of the work we have done with the Lagos State government is to develop mandates across the different ministries, departments, and agencies. Now that can be tweaked to also incorporate this 30-year development plan, and then run sessions for every part of the ministries, departments, and agencies to understand what that means, what it requires of them, and then give power back to the civil permanent secretaries, directors to now drive the implementation of it along with other things that have been talked about here. And then finally, to get Mr. Governor's commitment, because it's one thing to talk, it's another thing to walk the talk.
Thank you so much. That we have Mr. Governor's commitments to drive this plan and the changes required. And just to add to what you said, yes, power can go back to the permanent secretaries, but also accountability must be there. Responsibility and accountability. And if they don't achieve their mandate, then there should be consequences put in place. Yes. So with that, I'd like to thank my panel, and I'd also like to thank the audience for being a wonderful audience, for being as interactive as possible. We'll take the mandate back, and we'll hopefully get some resolutions that will be read out from this panel session tomorrow afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.